Archit for us to move live. Let us know, Archit, whenever we are live. Okay. We are now live, and I welcome all of you to the C20 Consultation on Rethinking Education. For me, it's not just an honor, it's a privilege and a matter of pride to be in the company of all of you and be present on this consultation on C20, where we will discuss about how does education can be rethought with the idea of Seva. And not just in India, but globally, how this opportunity of the presidency of G20 can be leveraged as a pivotal moment, not just for India's role to the world, but also take India closer to being the knowledge capital in terms of showing some form of guiding light to how different forms of Indian knowledge systems can be integrated in the education system itself. To be with us, we have Dr. Parag Singhlaji, who is going to be the moderator of today. Dr. Parag Singhlaji has been a personal mentor for me for this life and probably from the previous lives as well. Dr. Parag Singhlaji is a professor at IIT Delhi. He is a researcher on computer science department in machine learning field especially. As my personal mentor, he has guided me in all my difficult decisions in life, in my career, in my personal lives, as well as has shown unwavering faith in what Swami Vivekananda calls as human potential in enabling us to make better decisions. It was via Seva that we did with Dr. Parag Singhlaji in college that has inspired me to live this life of service. It was the college campus and the activities that we did there has got me to be where I am today. So it's a pleasure for me to see this discussion being moderated by Dr. Parag Singhlaji. Dr. Parag, welcome to the C20 consultation, and I hand over the consultation.
Thank you. Thank you, Shubham. Namaste, everyone. It's an honor to be moderating this important session with so many eminent panelists. So let me introduce the topic. This is a C20 consultation session on rethinking education, how Seva can catalyze a student's journey. And I think it's a very, very important topic, and it's something very close to my heart. Being a professor here at IIT Delhi, a faculty member for almost last 11 years, working with students and closely observing them going through various phases of 4 or 5 years that they spend here for UG students and also for PG students. There are few aspects that I would like to mention in the beginning, and then I have a set of questions for the panelists, which I'll pose, and then each panelist can share their thoughts on that. But just to set the background, I think what is really important is that often I feel Seva has multiple connotations, and sometimes I feel it's a sort of a misunderstood word. One sense of Seva is charity, right? That doing good outside in the world. But I think there is also an Indian sort of perspective, which is more comes from the Sanatan Dharma, which is saying that Seva is something which transforms oneself. And I think both these ideas are very, very important, right? That Seva has to be looked at something which transforms yourself and how it can really impact the society. So hopefully we'll be able to touch upon that aspect, especially from students and college or even earlier education point of view. Second is that, which is sort of related or which follows up on the first aspect, is why exposure to Seva is important for our students at various levels, right? I would even say at kindergarten level, school level, college education level, both in terms of how it changes their attitude, right? How they think about themselves, and also how it enables them to really contribute back to the society. As I said, I think both aspects are extremely important, because unless you transform yourself, I don't think a real change can really be affected in the society. So that'll be the second aspect that hopefully we'll be able to touch upon. And the third aspect is understanding the current status of our institutions, right? Often we talk about Seva, right? In Hindi we say that come for education and go out in the world for service. But and then there are structures in place. We'll talk about some of these. But are we really able to be true to the spirit of Seva? Are we able to inculcate that attitude in students, or something more can be done? So we'll have some discussion on that aspect as well. And then finally we'll think about, right, following up on this previous question, right, what else can be done, right, in our education system to really bring this concept of Seva Can it be incremental, or does it really require a paradigm shift in the way we think about education and Seva being an important part of it? I should also mention that there is an important connection with NEP. I was also part of another panel at IIT Delhi, which was around on a different topic but related to NEP. And I think NEP, at least at a couple of places, mentions Seva. It talks about various constitutional values, which includes Seva, Ahimsa, Swachhata, Satya, right, and so on and so forth. Multiple places it mentions Seva. So I think from that perspective also, right, it's very clear that the government has a desire to bring this aspect into the education system, and from that aspect also the recommendation or views of the committee will be very helpful for G20 consultations. Right. So I think with that brief sort of background, we'll get started. I will first introduce the panelists. We have 5 eminent panelists here. First one among us is Dr. Ramanand Nand. Let me introduce him. Dr. Ramanand Nand is the Director of Center of Policy Research and Governance. He has also been the advisor of the Ministry of Education, Government of India. He has a PhD in Education from Delhi University and Masters in Dalit and Tribal Studies from TIS, Mumbai, which is a premier institute in this area. He writes on News 18. He writes for News 18, the print Times of India, on policy and social issues. As a public policy expert, he was associated with the committees that shaped NEP. So I think that's very important for our discussion. He has prepared policy documents on SADG and other policy issues. He has also authored chapters in many academic journals and books. Right. So I welcome Dr. Ramanand Nand. The second panelist that we have is Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai. Right. Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai is the author of 17 best-selling books, one of them being The Art of Winning, the Chanakya Way. He is also a leadership coach and mentor and a researcher. Along with this, he also guides the PhD students, right? He is an academician at Mumbai University. Moreover, he is also the founder and chief mentor of Chanakya Anvishiki Private Limited and the director of Chanakya International Institute of Leadership Studies, that is CIILS, University of Mumbai. The third panelist is Srimati Suparna Divakar. So Srimati Suparna Divakar is currently the mentor of the fellowship under our organization, that is Sewa International, as well as the mentor of the Karnataka Task Force for Implementation of National Education Policy 2020. Along with this, she is also the board member of the School of Inspired Leadership. She is an expert consultant in the National Curriculum Framework. She has led various institutions in the past, including the Indian School of Development Management as the founder and dean, and Adamya Chetana as the founder trustee. She describes herself as a learner, educator, and facilitator, and has given a significant contribution to the fields of the development sector of India in education, leadership, and management. The fourth panelist is Shri Kiran DM. Right, let me introduce him. So Shri Kiran DM is the South Sherpa in the Civil 20 India 23. He has also served as the founding president of Youth for Seva, which is a very important and big organization about incorporating Seva values among youth, which is a youth-based volunteering platform for both corporate and professionals, as well as college students. Along with this, he has also been the CEO of ONGC Foundation and director of iSol Softtech Private Limited. Moreover, he's also been the director and coach of iSol Talent Consulting Private Limited. His contribution in both IT and non-IT fields has been of more than 20 years with a demonstrated history of working in human resources and operations, general management, and corporate strategy. Last but not the least, and someone I have known personally, is Dr. Satish Mode. Let me introduce him. So Dr. Satish Mode has more than 12 years of experience as a professor in the Indian university system, and more than 25 years in the Indian aviation industry. Right? I believe he is part of the Air India for a long time. He is currently a professor and director of VES Institute of Management Studies and Research, member of the Board of Advisors in the Vision India Foundation, which I think has now essentially taken up the form of Rashtram, and Rashtram School of Public Policy, and the director of World Hindu Economic Forum. So having introduced the panelists, I think it's very clear that we have a broad expertise in terms of academia, as well as people who worked or thought about these issues on the ground. So given that background, let me just get started with the first question that I have. Okay, right. So I think the way it will work is that I believe there is no direct audience interaction, right? So I'll pose some questions. I'll request the audience to respect the time. I'll briefly mention, right, how much time we are expecting. A few minutes plus minus may be okay. There are about 3 or 4 questions. We'll see how things go. So the first question is sort of a starter, right? And maybe we can go in the same order that I introduce the speakers. So the first question is about the Seva itself, right? And I think each panelist can spend about 4 to 5 minutes. And the question is that NEP, right, 2020 mentions the word and idea of Seva in its structure, right? So what are your views as a panelist on this important panel in terms of formally incorporating Seva in our education system? Right? And if that is done, right, what would be the social change or its effect on the education system? And as I said, and also, right, the stakeholders, which is the students themselves, right? And do we really believe that such a change is important or not, right? And why not, right? So let me start with this question. So I'll request our first panelist, Dr. Ramanand, to share his thoughts.
Thank you for inviting me and kind of engaging this very interesting discussion. So, Dr. Prag, in my opinion, the idea of Seva or service has not been properly understood by all stakeholders of our education system, which results in us being unable to meaningfully transfer it to the learners. Usually Seva is seen in a rather myopic vision currently, while it is about the community service, helping the vulnerable and needy by volunteering in non-profit. It is also equally about working for a lot of organization, corporation with dedication, sincerity, and kindness. We need to understand this duality and transfer it to our students. For Seva, if we want to understand, it is also done by people like Ratan Tata, Varghese Kurian. Seva is about the finding oneness about amongst yourself, your work, and the society around you. It can be done in any field that one find your calling. For my understanding, we need to kind of explain the kind of the vast nature of Seva to our students. So they cannot think about from the only perspective of the kind of what we usually understand kind of the monotonous meaning of, as you explained, the typical kind of typical definition of just like a charity or something. Through a formal incorporation, it will positively impact public discourse at large, whether it is a formal events of experts like one we are in right now, or simple kind of discussion with family. There will be a conversation on Seva in the education system also. We need to also kind of incorporate in our education system in gradual manner, so the learner can understand how they can connect with the society, how can kind of they contribute with the society, with the community. It will also kind of lead to a gradual mindset and attitude transformation towards recognizing the connection that an individual and society has. There are ideas deeply rooted in the Indian thoughts and have been articulated by Swami Vivekananda. Now they will be operationalized and normalized in the education system through NEP 2020. I think now we have a national curriculum framework 2023, which is also talking about how students can engage with the community and how can community can be participate in our education system. And I think that's a good idea. The kind of engaging with the community, it's kind of a two-way process where Seva can kind of Seva can play a very important role. Moreover, it's point to a larger structural effect by exposing individuals at a young age to these ideas. We are more likely to deeply ingrain these ideas in them for long term. But for that thing, I think we need to also understand and we need to kind of recognize the importance of Indian civil society, how we can empower it, how we can how we can engage with our education system. I think yesterday in one of the seminar, I was quoting one example, and that example from the Karnataka, where some of the school alumni came together and thought they need to kind of give back to their school, and from that the concept of the ring the bell has come, and that is a very kind of that was a very unique concept where they were not thinking like they are doing kind of any service or any kind of charity. They were simply thinking they are they have taken education from the school. Now they want to just you know engage in more fruitful manner. So some of the alumni have started to to kind of redevelopment of some kind of infrastructural thing, try to kind of paint and make a school compound more interactive, so the students can learn, students can student can uh, come when school are open and student can come. They found kind of the campus is a more live, is alive, and they kind of get some kind of attention there. So these are the examples which can be can play a very important role. I have mentioned in this concept or this example in National Focus Group document also. See how community in form of I think in form of alumni, in form of kind of academic stakeholder can contribute in this thing. And I think I also met several who keep themselves informed, are affected and engaged with the, you know, engaged with their school system, and where they have sometimes they have kind of contributed not individually, but sometimes they have also tried to kind of contributed as a group or kind of as a community. Swami Vivekananda said, so long as the millions live in a hunger and ignorance, I hold every person a traitor who, having been educated at their expenses, pay not the least heed to them. Uh, that's why, kind of when we were discussing the idea of Seva during the discussion in, our NEP meetings, we have tried to kind of conceptualize it in a more, kind of simpler manner. How through Seva we can connect to the society, and that should not be kind of very as you also mentioned in your introduction. It should not be like this kind of charity or one-way thing. It should be a kind of a process where community also involved and school also involved. The formal incorporation of Seva is our education system is welcome, and I think it has been rightly mentioned document in our document 2019 and 2020 also. It makes an important element of an Indian education. Say, our education system is not like a kind of uh, have adopted the meaning of Seva as a kind of a voluntary service, or you can say just like a charity. Our education system said एजुकेशन का जो पर्पस है वो ही है कि समाज के साथ हम कैसे संवाद करते हैं, और समाज के साथ जो हमारा जो जो फीलिंग है कैसे वो वननेस को हम वननेस को अचीव करते हैं. So its support can be given through a variety of arguments, but fundamentally it is an effort to look inwards into the Indianness of education and learning in a time when the world of going through dynamic and volatile change. Seva, like most of other Indian thoughts, is not about a theoretical framework, but a practical one. It will also allow student to go both on an internal quest and an external quest. An internal quest to be able to pause and reflect on the world inside and outside them, along with the external quest to be able to pause, identify, and attempt to solve the problems in the world around them. And by saying this, I will kind of mentioned is, you know, the element of spirituality or element of kind of Indianness. I think we will also discuss in later phase. In our education system, has been, kind of gone, or you can say it was missing. जब मेरे हम लोग बीएड के करिकुलम में वी हैव टॉट कि शांति निकेतन में किस प्रकार नेचर के साथ जोड़ने के लिए करिकुलम डिजाइन किया गया था. बट व्हेन अभी हम अपने एजुकेशन सिस्टम को देखा जाए कि शांति निकेतन का एक कॉन्सेप्ट था, अनडाउटली शांति निकेतन उससे काफी डेविएट हो गया है. बट अभी अगर हम देखें क्या यूनिवर्सिटी का, हमारा यूनिवर्सिटी आइडेंटिटी से स्कूल, उनका कम्युनिटी के साथ में कितना एंगेजमेंट है, हाउ मच दे हैव बीन कनेक्टेड टू द कम्युनिटी ऑर्डर सोसाइटी. सो वी विल फाइंड इट काइंड ऑफ द जो वो बॉन्ड है वो मिसिंग है, जो कनेक्शन है वो मिसिंग है. So I think through Seva, we can kind of we can reconnect, or I will say kind of उस bond को हम फिर से reconnect कर सकते हैं, फिर से जोड़ सकते हैं. I will kind of conclude with this.
Okay. Thank you. Very nice. Thank you, Ramananji. So we'll go to Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai. Yeah.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this wonderful topic. As Dr. Parag said, it's a welcome sign of NEP, and we are deliberating and discussing. So I would say the concept of Seva in the Indian education system, especially NEP, is very welcome. But I would like to start with a few thoughts about what does Seva mean from an Indian context. See, if you translate the word Seva into English, the closest word that comes is called service. And that's a very, very Christian or Western concept. Okay, so if I had to put it this way, most of the churches, and again, here we're debating the philosophy side of it. Community service, philanthropy, charity, all this put together comes to a Seva. Yes, we should take the best from the West also, as Swami Vivekananda put it, right? So we should learn from maybe the Western aspect of Seva. But in India, it is not just service. It's a philosophy and attitude of life. For example, as we say, charity begins at home. So are we taking care of the elders in our house? I think that's the first level of education, because education, the formal structure, where we go to school or a college or university, is a very organized structure. But I think in India, we start our first education with our families. Matru Devo, Pitru Devo. And socially, if you look at it, Seva need not be only to old grandparents. The idea of Seva is, of course, Chanakya has written a lot about Vriddha Seva. That means if you're Vriddha, wise, old people in your house, you have to take care of them. No doubt about it. But you don't want somebody to be bedridden to do Seva. Even in listening to a grandparent and taking them to a Tirtha Yatra can also be a Seva. I mean, it's as small as that. And therefore, I would say that, even though we have organized structures in our country, I mean, even before NEP, I think we have NSS, National Service Society, we have NCC. Of course, NCC is more from the military and, the discipline part of it. But when it was formulated many, decades ago, NSS has contributed very well. And Satish sir may also tell this, because part of the Mumbai University, we have got more than 850 colleges, and the NSS did a phenomenal job. So we would say that, yes, let's accept the part of Seva from the Western perspective. But since we are talking about Indian education system, I would look at two important words. The philosophy of Seva beyond just, doing something to gather points. In fact, in many education systems, especially, you must be knowing students going abroad. If in their curriculum, they have done some service with some NGO, you get some points. I think we should not limit it to just the formalized structure. We should take part of it, but I think it should be a way of life. And that's where I think the educated people who go to serve the world. And therefore, I would just like to stop by quoting, our famous statement of parenting. Who is an ideal parent? And I would even go to the mother to begin with, right? An ideal parent is the one who prepares a child to serve the society. So I think as an education system, are we preparing children only for formally getting some points and then getting a job and employment? No. I think it's an attitude and a way of life. And it depends upon whichever profession you take up, Suppose you're in the armed forces, your karma yoga could be, or your seva could be with the battlefield as Arjuna and Krishna. Suppose you're working in the corporate world, wealth creation could be your seva. You're working in maybe the education sector, bringing up the next generation could be a seva. So I think we need to think about that seva should be an attitude of life and way of life and a philosophy of life to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you, Radhakrishnan ji. That was very nice. So we'll go to Srimati Suparna ji to share her thoughts.
Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. And it's an honor to be a co-panelist with all these very, very renowned people. Thank you very much for that opportunity. I would like to build on what Ramanand ji and Radhakrishnan ji have just said. And, the NEP is talking about holistic development of every child, every student. And Seva actually opens up those opportunities or avenues which are enabling socio-emotional and spiritual development. It is not related only to being able to do something in charity, of course, what we have talked about so far. But the emphasis of education so far has been hugely on the cognitive dimensions. And so the inclusion of Seva through NSS, etc., has been not very structured or not embedded in a way that enables the socio-emotional and spiritual development in an organized manner. And the education system is structured for organizing pedagogy, organizing content, organizing learning experiences in a way that it embeds some of these elements. So I think from that perspective, the philosophical dimensions, how do we translate those into the experiences, the pedagogy within education is something we need to very seriously think about. And right now, these are some of the conversations we are having while developing the National Curriculum Framework for School Education. It is, the process of moving from ego-centric to becoming ecosystemic-centric through the process of Seva. So you move from ego to eco, and Seva is your path to enable that. And that needs to be thought of in our education process. So can we think about, one example could be engagement with communities by young people on the real issues and problems that communities are facing. It enables not only the application of content that is being learned, but it provides the opportunity for young people to engage with real issues, work with communities, collaborate and co-create the kinds of solutions that are required. And in this process, it is a mutual learning exercise that happens because the traditional and local knowledge that is available in communities gets embedded as a part of this entire learning process. And through this structured, reflective process, it is possible for us to enable students to reflect on this learning experience they've gone through and highlight or make more explicit the socio-emotional and spiritual dimensions, rather than focusing only on the cognitive dimensions. So how do we enable this is a very, very important part of the pedagogy, because making explicit and being able to articulate feelings of empathy, feelings of compassion, a sense of transcendence of self in the process of, doing this kind of issue-based work or problem solving, whatever we want to call it, it enables the education process to sort of embed itself in the real life of people, real life of individual students, that deep connect between ego, demolishing ego, and transcending towards a more ecosystem, relationship-based kind of education. So I think the Seva element actually enables all of these. And so I think the challenge right now is, how are we going to structure this in the national curriculum framework? How do we structure this? Because NEP is providing the pathways or the opportunities for this, even in higher education institutions. In fact, in higher education institutions, we need to focus on it a lot more, because the multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and Seva is actually transdisciplinary in that sense, because it embeds a certain paradigm or philosophy of life. And so Seva is actually enabling these multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, into a transdisciplinary path. So I'll stop there and, we can take it forward from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suparna. I think it was very nice, right? Building on the idea, and then how do we really take it into our system, especially the ego to eco-centric part. Was, I think, very useful insight. So we'll go to Kiranji so that he can share his thoughts.
Good evening, and it's wonderful to be part of this panel discussion. I have a teacher with in the panel. I did a course with Dr. Radhakrishnan. I have a colleague with Suparna Divakar. We have worked together on various programs. I have a friend in Ramanand. So it's been an honor. I mean, listening to all of you has been very nice, and I think it's a welcome move to have Seva in the national, the new education policy. For a simple reason is, we have been studying from a Western framework so far. So whatever we think and do, we look at it from that perspective and try to get validation from the Western framework. For example, we would, the Western framework says that once you earn money, then you need to give money, do charity. You need to accumulate wealth and then give it. And but the Indian concept doesn't talk about earning wealth and sharing it. It is always about the Paramatma Bhav, which is there. And the part is that how can you be humble to serve somebody for giving an opportunity. That is the entire concept of Indian Bharatiya Seva. So it is not only, when we say about Seva getting into curriculum, it is not only about bringing few words, but how do we change the faculty, the entire ecosystem there? Because you need to move from the competitive spirit from the I to we. Today, the entire education is focused on how can I become excellent? How can I excel? How can I earn more? You go to any institution, what is the perception required for getting a higher rank in national ranking framework? It is the perception. And what is that perception means? It is how much salaries one is getting. So what are we linking? We are linking everything to looking at how I can excel and how can I earn. And we are looking at, okay, let me earn first, let me enjoy life, let me get married, let me do everything. And when I reach the 8th level of self-actualization, then I will give something back to society. So we are pushing everything into that framework. So I think for us, it's very important to understand how do we shift the ecosystem from the Western thought to the Indian thought. And when we think about that, then automatically what happens, we need to also look at one more thing. When you look at selfishness today, who are more selfish, the educated or the not so educated? You will find majority of the time it is the educated who are selfish. and they come towards the Seva part at a very later stage. So these are few fundamental issues with we have to migrate from here where we are currently to what we want to do. And what we want to do is moving from I to we. Then we need to look at from what will this kind of a curriculum bring out? What could be the outcome? For me, I would say the outcome will come definitely from the rights approach to the responsibility approach. We will start moving from this is my right, this is what I need, this is what you should be doing for me. From there, you will go towards this is my responsibility. I need to do these things, and together we need to look at take the ownership of community development. And that approach can come only when you do your curriculum well. So this is another important fact that I thought we need to look at. Then see, we are talking about community engagement. Go back to our earlier system. We are now trying to look at how do we move from Pathshala to Samajshala. But we need to understand that in our entire culture, Samajshala was pre-existence. It was already there. You used to learn from family like Radhakrishnan ji said, from the mother, grandmother, grandfather to everybody, even in the neighborhood. Even a person cleaning the street would teach you something. So there is nothing like who teaches. The learning doesn't happen only from a guru. It happens from everybody in the community. So the move from Pathshala to Samajshala will be effective if we are able to bring in the Seva concept at an early stage of today's children. From there, yes, as they grow, the entire curriculum will have to, the application of knowledge should look at from a lens of Seva. And that's what I feel. Maybe we'll discuss a little later, but I would like to end here.
Thank you, Kiranji. Shared some additional insight. That was very nice. We will go to Satish ji to share his thoughts.
Namaskar, everyone.
Namaste.
In the national education policy, the effort has been to look at all-round development of our students. Generally, when we look at currently in the curriculum, the emphasis is on information and knowledge. There was a survey by Harvard Business School of successful people, especially successful people with long-standing character who really survived in the eyes of people. They had a very surprising finding. They found that most of these successful people, their domain knowledge contributed only 35% to their success. 65% was contributed by software knowledge, what we are discussing today. And unfortunately, so far in our education system, we have been focusing only on this 35% part of it. This is the first part I would like to say. Now, if you want to cover this 65% of the teaching, then where do we rely on? I was going through some of the books. I found one book in my book library. The book is called The Indian Conception of Values by M. Hirayana, published in 1952 by Bhandarkar Research Institute. He had written a lot of essays based on Upanishad and what kind of learning teaching we should have. He talked about that if your learning has to be all round, you have to impart 4 values to every student. You have to develop 4 values. What are those 4 values which are given in our Upanishad and Vedas? One is the logical value. This logical value is what we call information and knowledge, which we derive through teaching learning process, through language, through hypothesis testing, inference. All that is logical value, and which is what we learn from junior KG to PhD, and we focus on that. This is a logical value, which should only be forming 35% of our time in the school and colleges, but we are putting 100% emphasis on that. What are the 3 values which M. Hirayana is talking about? The next is ethical values, which we call moral values, and which includes lot of qualities of character. I don't want to delve much into that. In Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 16, first, second, and third shlok, Krishna has talked about 26 Devi Sampada values, which we should inculcate. And in one of them, compassion towards all living beings is one of them. That comes from Seva. So when we are trying to develop this morality, we have to look at those 26 values which Krishna is talking about in Bhagavad Gita chapter 16. Then only the ethical values teaching will be possible. The third is aesthetic value. You know, somebody likes round shape, somebody likes triangular, somebody likes mountain, somebody likes river, somebody likes ocean. We don't give much focus on natural inclination towards what kind of aesthetics we have. That's why we find in our cities development, the way we build our houses, the way we arrange our offices, the way we live, because we have not taught the sense of aesthetics to our students, they simply do what they are impressed by looking at some place and they try to copy that. We have to have education system which will develop aesthetic value. I will again in future intervention, I will talk about how Seva will also help in this. And the fourth value is absolute value. That is the knowledge of unknown. A lot of things which happen around us for which even today there is no logical explanation. There are hypotheses, there are imagination, but there is no proof. But there are a lot of things in our Vedas and Upanishads which our rishis and maharshis have thought about, and they are there. Some of them are being discovered today. Some of them may be discovered at a later stage when our science develops. So until unless our education system includes these 4 values in our teaching process, then only there will be 100% impartment of education. And while talking about Seva, somewhere we will be moving towards at least talking about some of the values being integrated into our national curriculum. Right from the junior KG level to the PhD level, this should be part of our teaching learning process. Then only we will be able to develop all the 4 values in a student. And I would say that this is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Satishji. Right. So I think very nice. I mean, right, each one of you has really given a very different perspective on the concept of Seva, and I see some common themes emerging there. So one question that I have at this point is that, again, being an academician here, we do have a concept of Seva as, or the way it is done in the current institutions is in the form of NSS or some other activities. And often I've found that it is in the form of a compulsory activity, right? And many times that's not actually something that motivates the students, right? I mean, they go there, right? I've seen, and they spend an hour, but it's not very effective. And then I believe that for many such posed sort of form of activities, the real outcome doesn't come, right? So my question is, do we, right, given the current system that we have where we are, right, what is the next step, right? Do we believe with this sort of framework of having posed or having a specific component in the curriculum where every student has to participate in such an activity, or it has to be more coming from inside that, no, this is something that is really important for their own life and understanding? In other words, often, right, we talked about waste and ecosystem, right? Often everyone thinks about what is in it for me, right? And it may be hours or position of responsibility or resume value versus right, inner transformation, right? So how do we, right, what kind of changes do we envision in the current system so that students are motivated to really think about the aspects more from their inner self rather than really doing it because it is part of the curriculum? So maybe we can share some thoughts on that. Maybe we can go in the same order. Request Ramananji to take 2-3 minutes to share his thought.
Parag ji, I think as I mentioned, in NAP 2019, there was a only kind of they have mentioned Seva as a service, only one kind of, you can say only one line or half line. In NAP 2020, Seva has been mentioned only one word, Seva object service. But when we read and we try to kind of understand the NC of National Curriculum Framework 2023, which is basically operational document, that will shape the kind of the learner's school life, or we can say kind of it's a guide how school or kind of curriculum or pedagogy will function in upcoming years. They have extensively mentioned that how Seva will function in the school life, and they have been mentioned that Seva is as a one of the curricular goal. So to achieve the curricular goal, they have mentioned that they will introduce, or a kind of teacher can introduce some stories. I think आपने मतलब किसी ने चाणक्य का एग्जांपल दिया था, तो यहाँ पर पंचतंत्र, न्याय शास्त्र, जो चीजें हैं जो लोगों में बच्चों में संवेदना जगाती हैं, और वी कैन से कि द काइंड ऑफ द नीड ऑफ सोशियो इमोशनल और एथनिक डेवलपमेंट के लिए जो कंपोनेंट की जरूरत है, ऐसे कंपोनेंट को स्कूल की लाइफ से इंटीग्रेट करना है। और सेवा कोई वन एक्टिविटी के रूप में नहीं मेंशन किया गया है, एटलीस्ट एनसीएफ 2023 में। इट हैज बीन मेंशन्ड एज द पार्ट ऑफ डेली एक्टिविटी। सेवा को जो इंटरनलाइज करवाना है स्टूडेंट्स को, जो महसूस करे कि जैसे और सारी एक्टिविटीज हैं वैसे ही सेवा है। तो सेवा इज ए पार्ट ऑफ लाइफ, और दे हैव डिफाइंड सम काइंड ऑफ अ पर्टिकुलर करिकुलर गोल, and to achieve that particular goal, what kind of competency student will get. So it's a very interesting thing कि जैसे जैसे NAP 2020 unfold हो रहा है, now we are getting more and more information how Seva will play a very important role in the life of learner, and that is, I think, very interesting thing for us as a teacher also, and for the kind of the people who are involved in the kind of as an academic stakeholder in academic life.
Okay, yeah, that's a very nice perspective. Radhakrishnan ji, your thoughts on this?
Thank you so much. So definitely there is no question or debate among all of us that the Seva Bhav should be introduced in all the schools and colleges. I think there is no debate. And let me talk about two things. One is the policy level, and the second is the implementation level. See, NAP is out. I think I remember this meeting with our own Vice Chancellor at Mumbai University. It is a must. And when you apply something, there will be some change management process, no doubt about it. But I remember this very important discussion saying that, policy is done, but the implementation in the hands of the teachers and the educators. And I think that's a freedom and opportunity also. So let me now speak about the implementation first from a philosophical angle, and the second from an application angle, or what we call grassroots level. These are my thoughts. Chanakya said something very nice about the building of a human society. Okay, I will not quote Sanskrit, I will give that in Hindi just for easy understanding. He says, व्यक्ति से परिवार बनता है, परिवार से समाज बनता है, और समाज से राष्ट्र बनता है. 4 steps. Individuals combined becomes a family. Families put together becomes a samaj or community. And many communities put together becomes a nation. We can even take to the next level that many nations put together becomes a world. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Now this is a philosophy. I think we have to serve the world. In fact, we are preparing a generation which may actually go and work and serve the society globally. Because our education system is not going to be enough for India, but also not enough for the world. We are talking about a kind of a generation which is already global. And I'm sure each one of us here have family members, relatives who are settled in different parts of the world. But here is a very grassroots level thing that we need to think about. The first step, Vyakti se parivar banta hai. There itself, there is a challenge. We are all started thinking like individuals rather than families. In fact, we always, joke about it that, a family is actually a collection of people who think individually. We don't even think like a family. And I'll tell you one small experiment that we did in one of the schools. Very interesting experiment. We asked a group of students, how many people are there in your family? And you'll be surprised, 99% of them, I not even say 100% of them had single digit answers. 4 people, 6 people, 8 people, right? Then I had to repeat the question and I said, I'm not asking you how many people stay in your house. I'm asking you how many people are there in your family. And then suddenly the number became 2 digits. Oh, they start thinking mama, mommy, chacha, chachi, cousins. And suddenly the number sometimes even went up to 3 digits. Now you think about this, philosophically, it's a challenge that we are thinking like individuals. 6 people staying in your house is not your family. It's a part of your family. Therefore, I think one of the things we should definitely introduce is exposure at the grassroots level. I think if we can have educational tours to take them to villages, and I think all of us are already doing that in one way or the other. It's called exchange programs. I remember, Satish, we had done an experiment in Maharashtra where students from Northeast came to Mumbai and vice versa, right? And suddenly you realize we are one family. Of course, you can think about international travel, but at least let us begin by making them think like a family, which is beyond your house or beyond individuals. So I just want to tell that it is very important that we are thinking more like individuals. So I think the concept of Seva is to expand your concept beyond I, me, myself. Earning for a family member is, I think, part of our culture. But today we are talking about earning for the whole community. So, we are very happy that, even if there is one person earning in the family, the whole family can survive. We have seen families where the pension of a grandfather can take care of whole 7, 8 people, right? But that's not enough. So I would say that, let us look at experiments beyond policy at the grassroots level. And I think there teachers have to be innovative, creative, and of course, give them larger heart and a broad shoulder to accept bigger responsibilities. Thank you.
Very nice. Suparnaji, your thoughts?
Yeah, we've got some very deep insights from the previous speakers. I want to just build on a couple of the ideas. One is the NSS itself has been around for a very long time. And I feel that, it has made some difference to, the students who have participated in NSS activities. However, from the point of view of NEP and its implementation, I feel there is an opportunity for us to restructure NSS in some ways from the point of view of Seva. One of them is that while, these NSS activities were like add-ons, one-off, you went and cleaned the streets of some village, came back. It gave you, for example, an urban student going to a village, it sort of gave you an exposure, showed you a different reality. However, to be able to enable this innate sense or trigger this innate sense of compassion, empathy, this sense of connectedness, oneness that we were referring to, we might need to design something that is far more consistent and long-term, which is enabling a relationship to get built between students and the communities that we are referring to. Only then will we move from what Kiranji was saying, right? From I to we. How will that happen unless those relationships are getting built? The second aspect I feel which might be important is that while you go through the experience, and a lot of learning in our Bharatiya context is experiential. We give a lot of importance to it. But to take this experience into learning, to make it something that is learned, we will need a process of facilitation of the experience to make it learning, to say yes, right? Because how does the mind map learning? So from that perspective, I feel that there might be a need to facilitate the reflective aspect, and the teacher needs to play a role in being able to take this experience into learning through a reflection process. Right now, I feel that is a gap. So, not just from the point of view of learning from a cognitive perspective, but what are you feeling? And feeling being a very important part of learning. That process we are currently not facilitating at all. So I feel that needs to be brought in. The other aspect, which Radhakrishnan ji was referring to, I feel is so beautiful. See, today's world, we have created a sense of scarcity among young people. There is a sense of fear, competition, scarcity, whereas Seva enables a sense of abundance, of sharing, which is a very different sensation to go through life with. It is not going through life with fear, but with a sense of resilience that there are people around me. There is abundance. I am not lost, right? A lot of, I feel, if we are able to embed this sense of abundance and see human beings with their innate divinity and not just as consumers and producers, it just shifts a lot of things. The mental health issues that we are facing today, and we know what's happening in the IITs, a lot of things will shift just if we are able to move from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, which is facilitated because of Seva. So how are we, and because we are talking about reimagining or reinventing education, a lot of this is about how are we designing learning experiences? What is the pedagogy? And keeping this purpose at the forefront, how are we creating useful or very deliberate experiences? Because we are talking about formal education processes. So I think some of these elements need to be deliberately brought in. And I am currently the one of the members of the technical secretariat for NCF. And the pre-draft has just come out. And as Ramananji was explaining, a lot of the elements of Seva we are trying to integrate into the daily practice of schools. What are schools doing on a regular basis? And that is going to be, I feel, also challenged, because from a leadership, management, administrative perspective, a lot of things need to be facilitated, enabled for teachers to do this, right from how are you creating the timetable. Right. So thank you. I'll stop now. And
Thank you, Suparnaji. I think I would agree that experiential part is what makes it really different. And I think probably we may not have time for that, but to discuss that in detail, I think role of teachers and orienting teachers themselves, I think, is also very important. We'll go to Kiranji now to share his thoughts on this question.
I think first I would say that whether this NSS or any compulsory programs does make a difference in people's life. Whoever have participated, it gives a different kind of an orientation. How many of them will latch on to that and carry it as part of their life learning? That is a different issue, but definitely it gives an orientation. Also, I believe that everybody has the Seva Bhav, irrespective of where they are born and where they are. Because whenever we look at calamities, the recent pandemic, if you look at, how many people came out on street to support others? Various kind of people who have not been trained, who have not been doing anything, but they came out and nobody called them. It was all their own inner feelings. And I mean, this you could find everywhere. It is not that it is happening in few pockets, which means as a community, we are having that latent Seva Bhav within us. Now, how do we bring this out as a particular process? I think this is where the entire thing will have to be going wrong. And for me, my personal experience has been that if you have an inspired teacher, you can get this bar. It is not by doing an activity or reading something, you will not get that. It has to come from an inspired teacher. The teacher has to be inspired, and only then it can come. If you look at the tribal communities even today, why there are no orphanages or old age homes there? Even when there are no, both parents are dead, there are no orphanages. The community automatically takes, it is my responsibility. If there is a house that is burnt out, they don't go for governmental help. They don't put a application and wait for government to sanction money. Within 2 days, the house is rebuilt. The community does that. See, this is the kind of a thing which is already there. And if you look at all these, all the people who have made a difference in somebody else's life today, if you sit with them and start decoding when did the transformation happen in their own lives, believe me, most of the transformation would have happened when they were young, in the formative age. So it is very important that how do we bring that? And the experiential part, Anubhuti plays a very important role. There is no two things about that. At the same time, how do we build in the process of reflection within the study part? Because today it is information deliverance and examination. We are forgetting the part of reflection, the understanding and the Anubhuti. I think that should be brought into the system. And I feel it is not going to be that 1 year you make all these changes. It's a process by itself. And it's a continuous learning process, because we'll have to make certain things and then look at how will we do it. But in totality, if you look at NSS or any other such programs, definitely it has made a difference. But major other thing is lakhs of students are going to be suddenly put into this framework of you need to get into the Seva part. Now you also should create an ecosystem for them to deliver. So that also is a very important aspect. So it's not only about putting those thoughts and building that attitude, but also creating this. As part of Youth for Seva, we realized this thing. Whenever we used to send volunteers to the government schools or orphanages and all, there used to be a lot of resistance. Because in their working schedule, how do you incorporate these people going and giving time? So to accept volunteers, also you need to create that ecosystem. So it's not only working with the school and curriculum, but it's also working with society to see how this correlation happens.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more on the inspired teacher part, right? I think students, I've talked to many students, and I think what they learn from an inspired teacher is much more than they learn otherwise, I think, at least in the experiential side. Yeah, I would completely agree. We'll go to Satish ji to share his thoughts.
Yeah. In the first segment, I talked about the philosophy. Now, it was always in my thought whether we can integrate that philosophy into action. In our institute, where I am director for last 10 years, we have integrated Seva into our curriculum. In the induction program, before students even go to the class, it is a business school where we have intake of 360 students. First 5 days, what they do is, the second year students, seniors, we have a tie-up with nearly 60 NGOs in and around Mumbai and across the country. So every year, the seniors choose a product made by one of these NGOs, and we purchase in bulk those products. And the first task all MBA students have to do is, they have to go out in the field and sell those items. They are given training by the NGO that who is making them, deaf, dumb, or those kind of people are from self-help groups. You will be surprised to know every year, last 10 years, our students are able to sell more than 10 lakh rupees worth of those items. Everyone has been given a target. They go out. So right before the induction, they go into, because business is all about selling, generating revenue. and we talk about generating revenue, but when we integrate that into a part of selling a product for NGO, the training begins from sensitivity, sensitizing them about that this kind of thing, how you can contribute to the society. This is the first part. Second part is in our curriculum, we have integrated that during 1 year, every student has to spend 21 days working with an NGO. When this Kedarnath incident disaster happened, 10 of our students, 5 boys and 5 girls were in that area in some remote village teaching computers to students. When we heard about that Kedarnath incident, for 7 days, we didn't know what happened to them. After that, we came to know about that. And after that, our institute has built so close relationship with this Uttarakhand. Every year, 10 to 15 students go to Kedarnath area, and they have formed a Kedarnath group of students. In 10 years, they have a group of nearly 90 students, and every year before this process begins, they all meet and share their experiences. So this is a kind of thing which actually energizes them to do more. Then we have a very close tie-up with Seva Sahyog. There is an NGO which is in various areas in Pune and Mumbai. So every year on Saturdays and Sundays, our students, they sit and fill up those books which are to be distributed to those poor students. So from whole day they sit and do this. So like that, every year, every student has to spend 21 days in Seva activities. They have to prepare a journal of their experiences. They share those experiences. And then we have a poster competition for all the students where they have to share what they have learned, what values they have learned. And based on that, they are evaluated. So all these Seva activities and learning is a 4 full credit in first year and 4 full credit in second year. So it is integrated in our curriculum. For last 10 years, we are doing it successfully. And every time after those 21 days, we have a full day experience, sharing the experiences workshop, and students, they cry. Actually, they cry. They had never seen such, life. When they say that when I go to a Jhopadpatti area, and everyone start looking at them because they are wearing very nice clothes, and very few people with those nice clothes enter those Jhopadpatti area. So from next day onwards, they start wearing clothes where they can, mix with them. So there are so many experiences. Nearly more than 90% of the students, they really participate, and this has changed the total pattern of learning in our institution. So this human sensitivity, compassion for the society, character building, and those 26 values, and those 3 values, aesthetic value, absolute value, ethical values, they are all being integrated. So Seva is actually through action. It cannot be taught in the classroom until unless you go out in the field. In my younger days, I was member of NSS for 5 years in engineering. Those days, 5 years engineering. Every year I had gone for NSS activities, but they were some 5 to 6 days in a year where we will stay night in some outside village and do some activity. But I would say that there is enough scope even today in our education system where if principals and directors and faculties are interested, they can do that. I know I am a judge in SPJ Institute of Management, which is among top 10 management. They have this Manish Shrikant was the director. He has integrated these values. Even in Narsi Munji, where I was 3 years professor and associate dean, they have integrated this. So good institutions on their own, they have already done this. The need is that we have to do that across the country so that this Seva becomes a way of life for our students. And when they go out in the world, they understand their responsibility. They become responsible citizens.
It's a very nice example of what can happen on ground, right? Even in the current ecosystem. And I think many of our institutions can learn from the experiments that you shared. So I think we are towards the end of the session. I had many more questions on my mind for this panel or even otherwise, right? Hopefully I'll get an opportunity to interact with all of you at some point. But as sort of a closing question, since we have only about 15 minutes or so, So I would like to ask all the panelists if there are any specific or 3 recommendations, since it is in the context of G20, right? So any 3 recommendations that you have for G20 world leaders to imbibe this imbibe, nurture, right, or even strengthen this Seva bhav, right, at a global level, right? This philosophy of Seva that we talked about as a transformational process, experiential process in the civil society organizations and individuals globally, right? So if you have any 3 specific recommendations, and in that context, what can be and should be the role of Indian government and India civil society organizations for the same, right? So if you can share your thoughts on the same, that would be very helpful. So you can go in the same order. You can start with Ramananji.
Parag, I think आज का जो हमारा डिस्कशन है that was totally based on how our understanding of Seva differ from the kind of a concept of best, जो best का concept है volunteerism का. And the social work Seva has been emerged as a concept in best post First World War and Second World War, and that concept is totally different how we conceived Seva in our society. And I remember kind of here is one example of Dr. Kotnis, who went to China and died there. That is kind of one of the example which what we have kind of practiced and what best practiced. So I will suggest here I think we should document or we should kind of philosophize our idea of Seva. Otherwise, we, either we will accept or reject kind of the Western notion of service or charity. So to kind of educate or to kind of circulate our idea of Seva, we need to first kind of formulate or kind of prepare a concept note or some paper where we kind of we define it in more spiritual manner, how we understand Seva and how we want to kind of implement Seva and how we are implementing Seva in our education system. And one more thing, I think Dr. Sateshwar was explaining about the how good institution are working on the Seva issue. I was also part of this, and I have done some field work. I was in Kamatipura area where I was teaching sex worker children. But in my understanding, what higher education institution for getting as a Seva, that is a typical field work where they just want to expose students to kind of field realities, so they can objectively analyze, understand, assess the kind of the society and how they will work in future in the future, and how it will be it will help them. If we actually want to work in the society, if we actually want to kind of propagate our idea of Seva, we need to work in the school. And a lot of school either in kind of whatever kind of thing जो या तो पहले हमारा जो ये NSS का कॉन्सेप्ट है या कुछ बेसिकली जो स्कूल वर्क एक्सपीरियंस का कॉन्सेप्ट है, वो जो हमारा आइडिया है आई थिंक जो इवन जो गांधी का जी का आइडिया था बुनियादी शिक्षा में जो उन्होंने प्रोपोगेट किया था, दैट इज ए टोटली डिफरेंट थिंग. हमें लगता है कि वीक में कोई एक्टिविटीज करा देंगे या हम कम्युनिटी में भेज देंगे एंड आवर रोल विल बी एंड. If we really want to make any difference, we have to kind of build a proper framework, proper curriculum for the school children. And good part is that this NCF is doing that thing. So simply we can also take out some example from this NCF, and we can kind of recommend for this G2020. And only one thing I just want to say, किरण जी ने बोला और मैं उसको थोड़ा सा फिर से एक बार रिपीट करना चाहता हूं, बिकॉज ड्राफ्ट नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी 2019 उसको कहा है कि व्हाट एवर एजुकेशन, व्हाट एवर स्किल, व्हाट एवर थिंग वी गॉट फ्रॉम आवर एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशन, वी नीड टू थिंक अबाउट दैट व्हाट काइंड ऑफ डिफरेंस दैट इज मेकिंग इन द सोसाइटी, व्हाट काइंड ऑफ डिफरेंस वी आर गोइंग टू ब्रिंग इन इंडिविजुअल लाइफ. And that should be kind of our one of the objective of our Seva work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramananji. I think those were very useful thoughts. I will go to Radhakrishnan.
Yeah, thank you so much. Since you asked about 3-point agenda for the government, I would say not only the government, I think even for the teachers, and I think even parents at home who have to develop the concept of Seva. The first thing is that we need to focus, as you know, all of us have agreed to, and each speaker spoke about it, that we are talking about holistic development. Holistic development is about 3-point agenda. We can do activities, and as Satish sir said, we can have community development programs. But the 3-point agenda is number 1. Our plans, policies, implementation should be based on number 1, a combination of East and West. So I'm going to put it. Second, it should be traditional and modern. And when I say traditional, I'm not only talking about Indian tradition. It could be some tradition from Europe, from American, because they also have a tradition of legacy and Seva in their own way. And modern, because today people are using technology for doing Seva. We see crowdfunding coming to raise funds for child education, health, etc. So it has to be traditional and modern. And the third, material and spiritual. Because see, what is happening is that, you have to understand that we're living in a world where economics is also important. And, in many business schools, you may be aware of it. Today, social businesses is what they call. There are courses on social businesses. That also requires revenue. It also requires income. So we are saying, can we also build a model where it's having a spiritual base, but also worldly wise? While winding up, I just want to tell, let us remember we are designing all these programs for the next generation. Our generation can make policies, but they are the ones who are going to live for it. The students and school and college. And let us not think that, they're going to live in the world that we lived in. They're already global citizens. They're interconnected. They're well informed. So I think we should learn from them. And I think in most of the schools and colleges, the board of studies today invites the students to contribute. So I would say that, every politician should think like a statesman. And I read a very beautiful quote. What is the difference between a politician and a statesman? A politician thinks about the next election. A statesman thinks about the next generation. So if we can get that 3-point agenda, I think we are done. We should pass on the metal to the next generation, and they will serve the world better and maybe in a different format than we did. In fact, if they can use WhatsApp or Seva, I'll be the most happy. And I like to learn from them how to use technology. So combination of 3s might, take away for, or I would say, give away for the 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Radhakrishnan, for very precise and specific points. Suparnaji?
Thank you. I know we are running short of time. So I think one thing which will be very useful is to share a framework. So one suggestion would be to say P2C2. And when I'm saying P2C2, I'm talking about one P is the purpose, which we have just talked about. If we have to integrate Seva as one of the key purposes of education, we should highlight that. C, another P is the process. How will we actually make this happen? C, the first C is with respect to the context and a deep understanding of the context, which will enable Seva. And third, the second C is the content, because there is a requirement, like Satishji was talking about the example from his school, there is a need to integrate the content with the other, 2 Ps and 1 C. So P2C2, that would be my contribution in terms of a framework to this discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Suparnaji, for P2C2 suggestion. It's very helpful. Kiranji?
If you look at what should be the G20 leaders' takeaway, I feel the first takeaway should be that Seva and spirituality go hand in hand, and that no one kind of spirituality leads. That is something which we need to understand. That is what is going to make the difference. This is to the G20 leadership if we are to give. Second thing is, how do we collaborate the work of Seva across various nations? And for that, the G20 leadership should also facilitate in terms of creating collaborative platforms. And civil society should be treated as one enabler rather than looking at it from a framework of various laws and statutory things. It should be looked from an enabler perspective. And today, if you look at globally, there is various shades of looking at it from a suspicion. So I think the move towards looking at it as an enabler should be the thing. And Indian lessons can be shown as examples, because here you look at many of the Seva organizations are run by volunteers. There are many organizations where you don't have any full-timers. So this concept should be enumerated to them. And through that, we need to build this process of Seva philosophy across the globe. Yeah, thank you.
I think civil society being enabler is very important. Satish ji?
What I would say is, in the national education policy, they have segmented school education into various parts and then higher education also in various parts. If you are looking at values development, I would say that up to the 8th standard, we have to build Seva Bhav in students as awareness and exposure through various stories and visits to areas where this kind of work is going on. Because they are still in the formative stage, their mind is developing, their body is developing. So with their knowledge, information, and physical strengthening through sports, they should be given equal emphasis on. And we have thousands of such stories which can bring in the Seva Bhav and exposure to the Seva Bhav. So awareness and exposure to Seva Bhav up to the 8th standard, that should be the focus of NEP. From 8th standard to 12th standard, now they have developed their mind and they are in a stage of choosing a career. So when they are about to choose a career, they should be given a broader exposure to the Seva activities, where some of them can actually look at service as a career, whether it is administrative service or whether it is non-government service or social service. So because currently what we give option is only whether you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, something like that. But when we are designing our curriculum framework, we should really think through multidisciplinary thinking that students get enough exposure to choose subjects from 9th to 12th, which they can follow up for their undergraduate studies. Now, when we go to higher education curriculum framework, the G20 Seva can say that undergraduate students should actually physically participate in Seva activities. Participation should be integrated. NSS is one of the part, but there should be many such youth for Seva, or like that there should be a confederation of various such projects which should be offered to a cluster of schools who can really make use of this. And all undergraduate students should be part of their curriculum, should participate in Seva activities. And for postgraduate and higher learning, they should go into the higher level of learning and not only look at just participation, but thinking and developing future concepts for future generations, because they are the people who will become teachers. They are the people who will become leaders of business, most of them. So they will contribute in that manner to the society. So when we are looking at national education policy and integrating Seva, we'll have to look at in these 3 or 4 segments. And when we do that, then only the Seva integration will be really fruitful. Thank you.
Thank you, Satish. I think it was a very nice categorization of how we can achieve this across various stages of development, starting from early childhood to all the way to postgraduate education. I think we are almost out of time, and given the kind of thoughts each one of you have shared, I don't think I'll even attempt to really summarize them. I think this entire session is on YouTube, right, for people to watch, and I'm sure it'll be very helpful. I'll just say a few words, I think, which I could sort of gather from this discussion, which I sort of at least reflect the theme that we discussed today, which is right in the context of Seva, right? There is an important role of family, teachers, collective effort, collective consciousness, right? There is also an important aspect of the fact that Seva is very experiential, important component of reflection and inspiration, which comes also by watching others around you in the community. And finally, right, to really attain this philosophy at the ground level, we really need to build processes, right, in a practical manner, right, which is sort of aligns with the values of the society, right? So I'll end here. Thank you all the panelists for this nice session and taking time out to educate everyone. I'll hand it over to Sewa International for any final announcements if there are any. Thank you. Shubham.
Thank you all for joining today. It was not just inspirational. It perhaps connected the last four C20 consultations that we had done, from academicians to practitioners of development to spiritual leaders. Everybody has reiterated very similar points, and it connects to the larger point of what we are trying to do with Seva as a working group theme of C20 itself, not just for India, but for the world. Thank you all for joining.